All right, good morning. We'll get started here. My name is Steve Board. I'm the district administrator at the Richland School District. This is my first year in official capacity. Last year I was the interim district administrator, so I filled that role along with business official in some capacity a year ago. So thank you for coming here this morning. We've got a few things that we're going to talk about, referendum specific. Certainly have time to answer any questions at the end and then take you on a tour. I want to go through these four things with you here this morning, really the why, how did we get to where we're at, and then what does it entail in terms of the referendum next Tuesday, and then a tour, as well as any questions that anybody might have in the audience. I'm happy to try to answer those as well. All right, so the first question is why go to referendum? Why do we need to go to referendum? Why do school districts need to go to referendum in general? And just a little high-level view of school district finance. School districts across the state of Wisconsin are funded, okay, by what's known as a revenue limit. There's a limit on the amount of revenue that they receive, and that is all based on the number of school-aged children that a district has residing in their district. Okay, children age 4 to 18 that live in the Richland School District is what is directly related to how much revenue the Richland School District will get. When we have more students living in our district, then we have more revenue, and when we have less, then of course we get less revenue. And so when you look at the number of 4 to 18-year-olds residing in our district boundaries, this is a graph starting back in 2014-15 on the far left. You'll see that we peaked in 2016-17 with about 1,483 students. And then ever since then, the number of students that have resided in our district boundaries has steadily declined. This year we were at 1,285. And so by having less students, we actually get less revenue. How does that look from a census standpoint? Like, where are we at? This is the same information broken down by grade or by age. 4K all the way on the far left, about 73 of those students residing in our district, all the way to 113 on the far right. And you'll notice quickly that our highest four numbers are our highest aged students, okay? Grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Those aged students residing in our district make up the highest number of this graph, okay? And so as these four students or grades graduate from Richland Center High School or whichever school they may be attending, we will be losing funding on those and replacing them with different numbers as they come in on the left as 4Kers. So when we look at this graph, we're projected, obviously, to continue to decline. We think we're going to decline based on the number of students that are going to be graduating over the next 4 years and what we think we have coming in. But we wanted some more concrete information, okay? And so we hired Applied Population Lab out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, some crazy smart people from there that do this for a living, that do demographic studies to try to determine what a community or what a residence is looking at for population in the near future. And they ran 4 models for us, and here's a line representing each of those 4 models, okay? If I back up here a little bit, again, this is the same information, 1285 from 23-24, and then projecting it out from 24-25 all the way to 29-30, these are the 4 models that they ran. And you can see that there's a little variance between the 4 models, but you can see that all 4 of them show a steadily decline in the number of students that are residing in our boundaries until you get to about 28-29, where it looks like it may level off. Okay, now the further out you go, the harder the projections are to be accurate, but we do show a steady decline in terms of the number of students living in there. This is going to have a direct effect on the amount of revenue that the Richland School District has available to it. Switching gears here a little bit, you might have remembered last summer when the state was working on their state biennial budget, and you may have recalled politicians saying, we're going to invest in schools, we're going to give schools $325 per student in additional income, okay? And you might be thinking, why didn't that help? All right, well, the reality is, yes, we did get $325 per student, okay? Every school district in the state of Wisconsin got that. But what they neglected to tell you is that they gave you the $325, but before they did that, they took away, okay, what's called a hold harmless exemption. They no longer funded that for us, okay, for the Richland School District. And this varied a little bit for every school district in Wisconsin, but for us, that was $253 a student. So they said, yes, we're going to give you $325 a student, but we're going to take away $250 in this other funding source. That really only amounted to an extra $72 per student. And so while we thought initially that we would see excess of $400,000 in additional revenue, as it turned out, we only ended up getting about $80,000. Now, it was a welcomed $80,000, okay, but that hardly covers this, one staff member. Okay, $80,000, and it certainly wasn't what we thought we were going to get. So because of this, what I would call politicians' math, public was a little deceived on where that $325 came from. Yes, we got it, but before they gave it to us, they took away another funding source from it. So that was the net result that we had. You might also be thinking, why the Richland School District? Why does the Richland School District have to go to referendum? Why isn't this affecting other school districts? Well, the reality is it is. Okay? Since 2020 to 2023, the red, these are not county boundaries, these are district boundaries. Okay? Richland School District is right down here in this yellow here. That's our district. Anything in yellow is a capital referendum. People who have gone to referendum in the last since 2020 to 2023 for building projects or deferred maintenance projects or new buildings or whatever. In yellow is those that have gone for operating referendum. You'll remember in 2020 we went for an operating referendum as well. And then in gray would be both. Okay, so that's 2020 to 2023. What about this year? What about 2024? Well, everything in green, these are the school districts around the state that are going to referendum. Some of them went in February. The rest of them shown here in green would be going in April. Okay? There are still 2 more opportunities for other school districts to go to referendum this year. Most of them, if they are not going in April, will be going in November. We do not have that data. In the past, a lot of school districts went to referendum during presidential elections. Okay, and so many school districts will still be going in November, but this is what we know for sure. All right, so when you look at it since 2020 to this year, till this April ballot, all of those colored are going to referendum. So we are not unique in the standpoint that we have to go to referendum to keep up with declining enrollment and lost revenue. So in many cases, many residents may have seen some sort of wage increase in the private sector since pandemic. Represented just hypothetically by the green line. And then they've also noticed that we've had crazy high inflation since the pandemic as well. And even if people got a raise or had an increase in the revenue that they were bringing in as a private standpoint, they probably saw that if the rate of inflation keeps up, the wage increase isn't going to keep up as well. Okay? Another example might be for folks who are on a fixed income, represented by a static green line. All right, they have probably noticed, or those folks have noticed, that we have fixed revenue, but our expenses keep going up. All right, that's even more problematic because it creates a bigger gap on the back end. The school district is in a standpoint where we are actually asked to do more. Our expenses continue to increase. All right, with less revenue. All of our insurance premiums go up, our transportation goes up, wages go up, all of those things that everybody experiences from an expense standpoint continue to go up, and we're actually being asked to do that with less revenue. Okay, so this becomes obviously very problematic and hard for us to be able to educate our students effectively. All right, so how did we get here? How did we get to this point in terms of this is what we're asking for on a ballot? All right, question. Well, it starts about a year and 2 months ago. February of 2023, we started working with a company called Nexus Solutions to analyze our district buildings and our facilities and try to come up with the state of them, the status of them. Our maintenance department and custodial department has done an outstanding job keeping our buildings functional and operational, but where do we really stand with some of our buildings? So we hired Nexus Solutions, and then we also, in November and December of last year, hired the Morris Leatherman Company. Morris Leatherman Company is a company out of the Twin Cities, and they specialize in gathering community input and surveying the community to try to get a feel for what is palatable from different standpoints, in our case from a referendum standpoint. Morris Leatherman Company surveyed 400 people, and they did it the old-fashioned way. They called people up. Maybe some of you in the room received a phone call from the Morris Leatherman Company in December of last year. They called 400 people. They made sure that they hit different demographic groups. So it wasn't just one age group or one area of our district, city boundaries or whatever. We made sure that they hit each of the demographic groups with statistical relevance, okay? Enough people to make sure that their voice was heard, ranging from the 18-year-olds to the folks with families that are residing in the school district and living in the school district, to the city, to the rural areas, to those without families, to those that are retired, okay? And everything in between, and made sure that we reach that with statistical relevance. Took about 7 minutes with those that took the survey on the phone, and they have a plus or minus 5% ratio, and then we tried to listen to those results. And I believe that the school board did an exceptional job listening and following the results. What those results showed was that there were 9 things that the public supported in terms of improving the facilities of the Richland School District. So the green area represents those that showed support on a percentage basis. The red shows that those were opposed to those things on a percentage basis, and then the yellow is the small amount on the right that people just said, I don't know, I don't necessarily have an opinion on that. And those 9 things that the public supported, ranging from top to bottom, 82% said safety and security. They support that. They support putting money into safety and security to make sure that our students and staff are safe. ADA accessibility, okay, making sure that folks can get to areas if they're wheelchair bound, if they're get to all areas and that they're accessible, restrooms, things like that. Upgrades to technical education spaces, okay, our welding areas, our auto areas, those kinds of areas was something that the public supported. Air conditioning at the 2 buildings that don't currently have it. Right now, the Richland Center High School is fully air conditioned. The primary school, formerly known as Doudna, and the intermediate school, formerly known as the middle school, those mostly are not air conditioned. There are a couple of rooms that are air conditioned, but they're not fully air conditioned. Air conditioning is problematic from an educational standpoint when we get those hot and humid days, in addition to summer school, right? When we have people trying to be learning in those situations. Being more energy efficient, okay? This mostly revolves around envelopes of our buildings, windows, doors, things like that, to make sure that things are efficient from that standpoint. Deferred maintenance, things that have been put off because the budget would not allow for them to be fixed. Big project areas like roofing, parking lot areas, that had 68% support. Upgrades to this auditorium. Many people come into our auditorium and they think, wow, what a beautiful facility. This is, a new high school. This is no longer a new high school. This high school was built in 1996. It's now, pushing 30 years old, 28 years old. It's the original roof. The equipment in this auditorium many of it is original equipment. It's original plywood on the stage. Much of the sound and lighting equipment in here is original equipment. When we have people from the outside that come in and use this facility, this particular facility, and we do get a lot of them, whether it's dance or community players theater and things like that, they bring their own lighting and sound in here because the equipment that we have from the 90s is no longer is acceptable for their standards and their performances. Artificial turf on fields, so that there's no longer having to mow, those kinds of things were 55% supported. And then the addition of a field house or a fitness center was also supported 55%. Okay, when we went and brought our 7th and 8th graders up here, we used to have access to the campus gymnasium because of the situation of the county and the campus and the school district. Because of that campus being shut down and no longer funded, that has no longer allowed us to be able to use the campus gymnasium. So that creates a problem for us from a gymnasium standpoint. These are the things that the community showed some support in, okay? 55% or higher showed support in. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. I'll come back to those in a little bit here, but then I want to get to, so what are the priorities? What did the school district decide to do? So you understand the why we need to go to referendum in terms of funding. You understand how we got there. We polled a lot of people in the community and then tried to come up with what will work. Okay, and so this is what our school board was tasked with all that information and data from the facility assessment and the public. What did we come up with? What they came up with are two questions that will be on next Tuesday's ballot as it pertains to the school district and the referendum. Question one is a non-recurring increase to the revenue limit. Okay, non-recurring meaning this is not something that community stakeholders are signing away forever. Okay, this is a 4-year opportunity to show the public, earn their trust that we're being fiscally responsible with the money that they're allowing us to have, okay, if the referendum question 1 passes. So in 24-25, remember I said that we were declining in enrollment. That has a direct effect on the revenue that we receive. This would fill the gap. 2.3 million in 24-25, and each of the next 3 years after that increase by 100,000 in order so that we can keep up with wages and wage increases. This would come at no tax rate increase to the public. Okay? Right now we have a mill rate or a tax rate, those two terms are used interchangeably, of $9.12 per $1,000 of property value owned. If you have $100,000 of property, you would pay $912 of your property tax portion that goes to the Richland School District. Obviously, if you have more or less, that would be reflected accordingly. This would not change that rate at all. It would stay the same at $9.12 and allow us to have some additional revenue for operating purposes. What will this be used for? This will be used to keep up with those operating expenses that have significantly increased. I showed you those couple of graphs where the red line continued to go up. Everybody's experienced this in their personal world. Everything costs more now than it did 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We have to be able to keep up with those increasing expenses. Health insurance, transportation, electricity, utilities, all of those things. Okay? Secondly, it would allow us to keep up with the lost revenue that we have in order to increase wages and stay competitive and maintain our staffing ratios. One of the things that would happen if we were not able to pass this question is we would have to reduce some staff in order to balance our budget. Okay? This would allow us to maintain those ratios and get to competitive wages. Why do we need competitive wages? We consistently see staff members leaving the Richland School District to work for other local school districts that simply pay them more money. Okay? And as they're getting towards the end of their career, or they're raising a family, or they have a situation where they simply need more money, they are leaving something that genuinely they typically like, okay, but going to another school district because they can make more money. All right? Even our hourly people, okay, are making wages or have the ability to make wages higher than the school district and taking people away to work at fast food places or factories because the competitive wages that they're offering, we just haven't been able to keep up to it like the private sector has. This is from the Federal Reserve economic data. This is hourly earnings of employees in the state of Wisconsin since 2008. You'll see that there's kind of a steady increase until you get to 2020, and then post-pandemic, that increase in wages has significantly increased across the state of Wisconsin. And again, this is not probably earth-shattering data. Okay, I think we all know that wages have gone up. Yes, there's still technically a minimum wage. I don't know anybody that pays minimum wage anymore. Everybody's more than minimum wage, and it's post-pandemic you've seen this. It's been very difficult for the school district to keep up with that. And so this referendum would allow us to retain and recruit high-quality staff to come to the school district and pay them a wage that is competitive with what other local school districts and school districts around the area are paying. And then finally, it would give us a little additional revenue to increase and enhance opportunities for students. All right? Because of the increase in, for example, transportation, it is even difficult for us to take students on field trips and get them in opportunities outside of the walls of the Richland School District to be able to experience life outside of the school district or outside of Richland Center. We have generous PATTs and PTO organizations that help fund some of those field trips for our students, but we don't have the money in our budgets to be able to offer our students those enrichment opportunities and those opportunities outside of the walls, okay, of the Richland School District. So that's what that would allow us to do. Question number 2 centers around improving structures, okay, improving buildings and things you can touch. Okay, the first one is more around people and programming and opportunities, things for our students. This is more around buildings and things like that. We have a lot of safety, security, and accessibility issues. If you've ever experienced the traffic flow at the primary school or the intermediate school in the morning or in the afternoon during parent pickup and drop-off, it is very chaotic. The traffic flow is not safe. We have teachers out there that have to stand out there and stop traffic flow to allow buses, because the buses and the cars intertwine with one another. That's problematic. Many of our restrooms, especially at the primary school and at the intermediate school, are not ADA, according to standards right now, are not best practice. It's difficult for someone in a wheelchair to navigate around our restrooms and in our bathroom facilities. On the far right there, this is some hard surface areas leading down by our baseball field. Very uneven, very difficult for someone in a wheelchair or who's limited in mobility to be able to get to some of those areas and accessibility. I mentioned technical education in our auditorium. Our welding units and our exhaust system in those areas are outdated. Makes it problematic for students to be able to work on things with this modern equipment, getting them ready for a career outside of the Richland School District. They don't necessarily be able to get the hands-on experience under our current situation that we'd like them to get. I talked about the auditorium in this 30-year-old facility. Again, it looks beautiful, but a lot of the infrastructure in this particular building in the auditorium is outdated and not up to standards to be able to put on good productions and good performances for both our school students and the community as well. We have a lot of repairs and energy efficiencies that needs to happen. Upgrading our lighting to LED will provide a better lighting for our students and staff to learn in addition to being more energy efficient and economical. We still have areas of the roof in this particular building. The middle section needs to be replaced. It's original roofing, and so we have some leaks in there. We've got just outdated equipment. You can see the rust on the cooling and heating units. Again, this is our loading dock. Again, 30 years old. This is at the high school. The venting up there on the roof, rusting out. And then you've got many doors and things like that are old steel doors. They're heavy doors that are not energy efficient, and they are starting to rust as well. We've got a foundation that is sinking at the Richland Center Primary School, again formerly known as Doudna. There's sections of the 4K classrooms that are sinking, and so that has to be shored up. This crack continues to get bigger and bigger every year, and so we've got to make sure it's not a safety issue yet, but it will be at some point. We've got IT upgrades that need to happen to keep up with 21st century standards of technology. And so question 2 centers around asking the stakeholders to consider a bond. Okay, a bond for a school district or a municipality is the same as a loan from the private sector. And this would come at an expense of $14.76 per month, out-of-pocket expenses for an average property in the Richland School District. Average property in the Richland School District is $161,000. This is the actual out-of-pocket expense, about $15 a month, that a person with an average property would increase. Okay? The question asks to be able to issue bonds in the amount of $27,160,000. Okay, that is a large amount of money, but again, inflation is crazy high. I think that pre-pandemic, we could have probably done the same project for around $14 million. Now we're up to 27, and it will only get higher if we have to push this off. I mentioned $9.12, our mill rate or our tax rate. This question, if passed, would increase the tax rate $1.10 per $1,000 of property value. So it would go from $9.12 per $1,000 to $10.22 per $1,000 of property value. And again, average home, $14.76 a month, just under $15 a month. So coming back to this slide, I mentioned the priorities at the Morris Leatherman Company, and there were 9 things that the public supported. But when asked about the increase, the out-of-pocket increase, what we found was that while people in theory supported these things, they couldn't financially support them. Okay, times were tough, and so we had to make sure that we were very conscious of what we were actually asking the public to consider. And so what our board did, and what the Morris Leatherman Company deduced, was that folks could afford a certain amount, but they couldn't afford everything. All right, and so we have identified the top 7 things, okay, on this priority list, and this is what that referendum question will focus on. All right, safety and security, ADA accessibility, technical education upgrades, air conditioning to the primary school and the intermediate school, those energy efficiency upgrades and HVAC upgrades, deferred maintenance such as roofing, parking lots, and then upgrades to the infrastructure here in the auditorium, Richland Center High School auditorium. Artificial turf, while was supported by more than half, was not something that our community could financially support, nor was any sort of fitness center or field house. Okay, so those are not included in it. I just rattled through these, I apologize. Safety and security, ADA, tech ed upgrades, air conditioning, energy efficiency, deferred maintenance, and then those auditorium upgrades. All right, so with that, there are a handful of questions that I've received fairly consistently, and I'd like to start off the question and answer period with those, because many of you may be having some of those questions, and I'm happy to turn it over to any questions that you might have. I can try to answer them to the best of my ability. We do have folks from Nexus here as well, and then Brian Jones, our Maintenance and Operations Director, will take anyone who wants to go on a tour of the Richland Center High School and see the facilities and see what the referendum actually, how it will affect this building in particular. So some of the questions that we've gotten, okay, this is not necessarily referendum specific, but I think it's worth pointing out, is the district taking over Simons? All right, this was something in the community. I've addressed this numerous times. The answer is no. Okay, Simons is not part of this referendum. Okay, what will the school district do, or what's the role that the school district will have in regards to Simons? I've said all along that I want Simons to be a viable part of our community long term. Okay, if the school district at some point can help be part of that solution, we're willing to consider that, and we're willing to have those conversations. In the end, I'm committed to working with our city and our county, okay, through this process to make sure that we can come up with a viable solution that works for everybody. But it is not part of this referendum. We are not taking over Simons, and if your vote does not change this in any capacity. Simons is not part of this. All right, second thing. How will I know that the money will be spent on things that I'm showing, that I'm telling you? You may have heard that there's some distrust in the community from 2016. Well, the community, they said they were going to put air conditioning in those buildings in 2016, and they didn't do that, all right? One of the things that we've done this year for this referendum is we've specifically placed those items in the referendum question. And so it's a very lengthy question, but it does include all of those things we've talked about in terms of safety and security, air conditioning, deferred maintenance, technical education upgrades, auditorium upgrades. And so by having them specifically listed in the referendum question, we're bound by law to spend the money on those things. And while back in 2016, I was not in any capacity in this role that I was in now, so I can't speak on the details of it, but I do know, just looking at board minutes, that was done in a public forum, and that was done at a public board meeting, okay, where they voted on the scope of the project came in a little high, and so they said, well, if we can't put air conditioning in all of our buildings, we're not going to put it in any of the buildings, and so there was a vote that took that out of that. This one, they're not going to be able to do that because it's bound by law that it's in the referendum question, as opposed to a general question of district-wide improvements. We've specifically listed out all 7 of those improvements that I talked about earlier. What happens if either question fails? Well, if question 1 fails, we're going to be forced to eliminate 6.5 positions for next fall, okay? Now, full disclosure, we are planning on reducing staff by 1 of those 6.5 regardless of whether it passes. We've got one upper management position that is retiring, and through attrition, we're not going to replace that position. Okay, so we're going to go down one regardless. But those other 5.5 are teachers. These are teachers that I'm talking about here. These are teachers that are working in our school district that we will have to educate the same number of students without those 5.5. So we will have to go down an additional 5.5. And again, I want to remind folks that there's no tax rate change to question 1. Okay, it's going to be $9.12 regardless of whether it fails or doesn't fail, or it passes or doesn't pass. If question 2 fails, simply speaking, the buildings and the space are still going to need those upgrades and repairs. Okay, the problems don't go away. Our auditorium, sound and lighting doesn't get newer. The roofing in the major part of our high school doesn't get fixed. Our doors and windows will still have those same problems that we talked about. Our ADA accessibility will still be an issue. Okay, and it is almost for certain going to cost us more down the road. At some point, these things are going to have to get fixed. Okay, and it likely will just cost us more down the road. So it's the reality of what happens if question 2 fails. All right, I often hear people say, well, why can't the school do more to bring students back? Okay, we've lost students to open enrollment. That doesn't have anything to do with our revenue limit, by the way. Remember, that's based off of students that actually live in our district, not whether or not they go to the Richland School District or open enroll to another district. This is a problem that we've had, okay, and I'm not going to shy away from it. From 2012 to 2018, we had a mass exodus of students that left the Richland School District and went to other school districts, okay, through the open enrollment process. We have been working hard to try to build trust and bring some of those students back. I'm happy to say that this year alone, okay, we've brought back 20 of those students, but we still have an uphill battle with it. It is something that we're very aware of. We had about 260 students that were choosing to go to school in other school districts. We brought 20 of them back. It's still an issue, something we're going to continue to work on, but we are trying to make progress in that, and I believe that we've reversed the trend. Okay? And then I believe this is the last one. Why doesn't the district just budget for things? Why don't they know they've got a roof that's going to come to an end. Why don't they just budget for these things, or parking lots, or whatever kinds of things that they have? Okay, well, the reality is it would force us to eliminate staff and other opportunities, because if you just take Richland Center High School roof as one project, okay, that's about a $4 million project, $4 million to replace the roof on this building. If we would have said 20 years ago, right, this is a 20-year roof, let's plan on, okay, budgeting for that, we would have to save $200,000 a year. That's $200,000 a year that we would be putting aside into a separate account that we couldn't use for educational purposes. That $200,000 a year would be 3 teachers right there. And so every year we would have to do this, put this money away, and that's money that we would not be able to use for educational opportunities for our students. And that's just one project, okay? You try to save $27 million over the course of 15, 20 years, and it would come at the expense of staff, okay? And it would come at the expense of educational opportunities that we have. $200,000 a year, like I said, is 3 teachers, okay? And so this is why many, many school districts have to go to referendum to address these deferred maintenance and things like that, because they truly defer it. They say, we would rather have another teacher or 3 teachers than to put $200,000 into a savings account for 20 years to fix a roof, all right? And that's just the reality of school funding, and that's why so many school districts have to go to referendum. Okay, with that, that brings an end to my presentation. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. But if you don't feel comfortable asking a question now, or if you just have one that comes up later, all right, you're welcome to call the district office. That should not be a 0 at the very end. That's in parentheses. It's 4483. And then there's my email address as well. And I believe, Emily, is this information that's on those forms? They can fill, there's a, I don't know. These are on the table as you walk out, and you can leave a question. And then if you go to our district website as well, you can ask any questions through there, and we'll try to get an answer. But while you're here, I'm happy to try to answer any questions that anybody in the audience may have. Are there any questions that I can try to answer for anybody? Yes, ma'am.
You talked about the roof was not done. What are the other 2 or 3 things not done that we're going to pay for now?
Well, there are many more than 2 or 3.
Well, tell me as many as you can remember.
Yeah, okay, and also before I'm going to ask Brian Winterly here to Nexus to help as well, because they did the facility study, but portions of the high school roof have been done, okay? So there's one section around the middle that has not been completed yet, all right? So we've got hard surface areas, our loading docks, our parking lot. If you drove through the parking lot here at the high school, you'll see many potholes, things like that. Brian, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but can you help me out here a little bit with some of the, or Brian?
What's all included in the referendum?
In the deferred maintenance part. What have we not been able to address?
Oh, I don't know.
Were you here then?
Oh, you're talking the 2016 referendum.
Right.
Yeah, the only
Here
thing,
we are again.
the only thing that was not done at that point that was originally hoped to be done was air conditioning. Roofing was not included in that. The roofing that was included in that referendum was done at the other buildings, which is why the primary school and the intermediate school do not have roofing needs right now. That will get us out there. It's just the high school, and that was never part of the 2016 referendum. So that's the only thing, was just air conditioning of that 2016 that they hoped to get done, and then they had to pull it out of the scope when everything else. That referendum there centered mostly around safety, security, and then roofing at some of those other buildings. Was there anything else, Brian Jones?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Because you only have 3 buildings now.
Correct.
And we're still no budget, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. There's no doubt about it.
I'm finished with
If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Anybody else? Any questions? Yes, sir.
Oh, excuse me. In that age count in the school district, that's across the total population of the school district?
That is correct.
Okay, so like those that have their own schooling system, they're in that count, such as the Amish?
Not those that are homeschooled, but if they're going to, if they're open enrolling to Ithaca or Riverdale, it includes all of those. But Mennonite or Amish that are homeschooling or doing something, that does not include those.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Okay.
If they happen to be attending our school district because they have, special needs or have just chosen to come, then it would, but otherwise it would not. We don't get funded on those.
So their count is different. They're not included.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
They're not, would not be revenue, nor would they be an expense.
They don't pay either. Yeah, no, they're not a revenue group of people. Their taxes, they pay taxes, but not the school taxes, right?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think so. I think that that's not on, because we don't use the schools at all here. They have individual school houses within walking distance.
My understanding is if they pay property taxes, they would be paying a school portion of the tax, just like they would be paying a portion of their municipality. But I don't know whether or not those entities pay property
Oh,
taxes.
they do. Oh, yeah.
If they do, then they are likely paying the school tax as well. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
These outside companies that you hired for all these assessments, how much was spent on that?
Our agreement with Nexus, there's no money that has been spent on that. That's an agreement that they have. They're doing the facility assessment, and then, their hope is that they will be the construction manager if it passes. If the district chooses to do something else, there's a walkaway fee. The Morris Leatherman survey was $20,000 to do that. So that's what we have into it right now, is $20,000 for those outside
One other
assessments.
thing, assessed valuation of your houses, a lot of times it's lower than what the current value is.
Yep.
Well, in Marshall Township, ours just kind of got up to where it is, and my taxes went up 33%. not on, I'm just talking as far as school.
Total dollar.
The
Yep.
school. So I'm just saying that's something that may hit other people too.
Yeah, okay, so the school, property tax portion for the school district is not based on assessed value. It's based on the fair market value. You have two numbers on your property tax bill. One is an assessed value, and one is a fair market value. Okay, the city uses assessed value, all right, and so, or the municipality, because all of the folks in that municipality are the same. It's comparing apples to apples. But across the district, because the district represents, has representatives from different townships and the city, by law, we have to use the fair market value or the equalized value, and that comes from the state. So hypothetically, if you have an assessed value of, say, $160,000, okay, and your fair market value is $200,000, all right, because a lot of times your assessed is less than the fair market value. School district would tax on the fair market value, all right? So even if that gets reassessed, and it's now reassessed at $200,000, that doesn't change the fair market value, if all things are being equal. Okay, so they're two different numbers. It's like inches and centimeters.
So I'm living in the rural, outside of town. So what's mine rated at fair market then?
The school district's portion would be on the fair market. Your municipality would likely be on the assessed value. You know, the town of Marshall would be on assessed value. County and school district would be on fair market value. City or township would be on assessed. So the ratio between the two would change, but your fair market value doesn't necessarily change if simple math. This is an extreme example, but if you're assessed at 100,000 and your fair market value is 200,000, your ratio is 0.5. Okay. If you're now reassessed, if your township comes in and reassesses it at 190, okay, and the fair market value is still 200, the ratio changes to 0.95, right? That's the only thing that changes. It doesn't necessarily change your fair market value. So in that case, when folks get reassessed, it does directly change their township or their city taxes. It does not directly change their county or school district tax.
All I know is mine went up 33%.
There were a handful of townships that I know that we heard from. Marshall was certainly one of them. Drawing a blank on the other that saw a significant increase because of, what was it? Orient. That showed, because of some of the assessment. What's that?
Could it be land value related in part?
Well, yeah, obviously anytime you have improvements, that's going to directly affect it. But then the value of the land, again, if it's reassessed, yes, but it wouldn't necessarily change your fair market value. Yes, sir.
What numbers used for Southwest Tech?
Southwest Tech would be the fair market value.
That's fair.
Yep, anytime the taxing entity covers multiple townships or cities, municipalities, then they use equalized value. And the reason for that is because somebody living in Rockbridge compared to somebody living in Marshall may have had assessments done 10 years apart. So the state comes in and says, that's not right. We're going to equalize this. So anytime that they cross entities, it's equalized value. If it's within that municipality, then it's assessed value. Yes, ma'am.
So can you explain how, if the tax rate doesn't change, stays at what, 9.5%?
$9.12 per thousand.
Okay, so the referendum is needed because if you're getting that money, if it's not changing, where's the money coming from if it's not increasing property
Yeah,
taxes?
great question. So the question is, how can I think the question is,
Yeah.
how can it stay at $9.12 and not change if we're getting additional money? Basically, am I stating that correctly?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so in 2020, when the 2020, what I would call Band-Aid referendum was passed, the school got aided on that money, okay? And what they did at that point was the school board said, we're tired of getting a lot of volatility in our tax rate, going up and down. That was difficult for taxpayers to say, it was here, and then it dropped $300, and the next year it raised $310, right? And so that everybody loved it when it dropped $300, but nobody liked it when it went to $310, even though, it was only a $10 net change. And so the school board said, let's stabilize the mill rate at $9.12. That's where it's been the last 3 or 4 years now, okay? And what they have done is there's a financial strategy that school districts use where they can use that money to prepay debt, okay? So the 2016 bond that they did with the referendum that this lady was talking about in 2016, that loan was not scheduled to have 1 penny of principal paid on it until 2026. So 10 years, we were paying $222,000 a year in interest only, all right? So that right there is like making the minimum payment on a credit card and never paying it off, right? So in 2020, after that referendum, the school district used a strategy called defeasance, where they could keep the mill rate stable and use that money to prepay debt. Okay, so by the end of this year, by using that strategy, that $8.7 million loan will be down to right around $4 million. Okay, and we've been able to stabilize the mill rate. So if the referendum passes, they would stop using the defeasance strategy, and that would fill in the additional money. And if it fails, then we would continue to try to pay off that debt and save the stakeholders the interest down the road. Okay, so we've trimmed about 6 years off that loan right now. Does that answer your question? I know that was kind of a long answer, but does that answer it, how we can do that? That strategy is what allows them to do that.
Okay. So simple terms, if it passes, our taxes are going to stay the same. Let me make it clear, I'm all for paying my property. I'm not, I don't mean to sound like I don't want to pay extra taxes.
Nope,
I'm
fair
good
enough.
for that, But just so I understand how it affects the budget. So if we pass it, and these things can happen, what's going to happen to the loan that you're still paying off?
Okay. Okay, yes. If we pass the referendum, the $2.3 million goes into our general operating funds. Okay, so that allows us to operate and pay our staff and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
We would stop, there's 2 funds, there's this loan that we have out here as well. We would stop prepaying that and go back to paying only what we needed to pay through the life of the loan, which now has been reduced. If it doesn't pass, then we would just continue this over here. So it's 2 buckets of money, and we would stop pulling it out of this one and put it into our general operating fund, which is why that's dollar for dollar directly back into our budget if it passes, so that we can pay for teachers. Because we can't take money and just put it in our general operating fund without the stakeholders' approval, okay? We can take the money and prepay debt. That's the only thing we can legally do. So that's what we're doing right now. If this passes, we would stop prepaying, and then we would have the legal authority, because the majority of the people would vote yes, then we would be able to pay for teachers on it,
Okay.
and wage increases.
Basically, you'd have to pay
Hope that makes sense. Yes, sir.
On my tax form, there's 2 other things that says we got to pay on until 2035. Do you know what those are for?
That's this referendum debt that we were just talking about.
Oh,
We're
okay.
no longer 2035 now. Okay, that's been reduced and will be reduced through this defeasance strategy. Although there will be, if question 2 passes and we have to take out another loan for $27 million, then you'll see that one on there as well, and that would go from 2024 to 2044. They're 20-year bonds by law. That's all they can be. Any other questions? Yes.
So there's been, I don't know, 2 or 3 different schools that have been sold, buildings that have been sold off. How is that money being used?
The question is, there's been a couple of schools, Lincoln and Jefferson will be closing in April. How is that money being used? Okay, the money for Jefferson will not do anything until that closes, but then that money will be used. We purchased East Hall for our partner school. That will be a wash for that. So what that gained us was, instead of having the full size of Jefferson to have to maintain and heat and cool, we went down to a much smaller footprint and a wash. The money that was received from Rockbridge as well, Rockbridge and Lincoln, went to pay for, or partially pay for, phase 1 of re-roofing the high school. There were 4 phases. 3 of them are left. We've done 3 of them, and we have the last one. So that helped fund the roofing on the high school. Any other questions?
This will be a short one.
That's all right.
You said 400 people were surveyed, or you tried to do 400 people. How many answers did you get really?
400.
It was.
Yep.
Okay, so how many did you start with then? So I have a ratio. I know that you went to 1,000 people and only 400 were interested in doing it, or something.
Yeah, that's so more. We hired a third party to do that, so that nobody could say that the school district, manipulated the numbers or anything like that. So Morris Leatherman did it. I don't know how many phone calls they had to make in order to reach 400. Brian, I saw a hand go up.
I think I want to say like the non-response rate was like 4.5 or 5%. It's in the survey that's, I think, on the website, correct?
On the website, yes.
Peter Leatherman?
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but
The survey is on the website.
is that accurate, Emily?
Yep, the results of that survey are on the website, yep.
I'll find
In
the
our
answers.
board meeting.
I know that
as well.
I know Morris Leatherman, when they identified people to make sure that they hit all of the demographic groups, they would call, almost always. I don't think people answer on the first call because they don't recognize the number. They'd leave a message, and then they'd call back, and they would just keep calling back until they either said, I'm not interested in taking this, which I think is the percentage that Mr. Winterly is referring to, or they took the survey.
If you provide me your email, I can send you the video of the results being presented too.
Any other questions before I turn it over to Brian Jones, our Director of Maintenance and Operation? I should introduce a couple of folks, I apologize, but Emily Dolan here in the front is our Director of Marketing and Communications. Brian Winterly here in the right there is representative of Nexus. He was directly involved in the facility assessment and can answer many of those questions. Brian Jones is our longtime maintenance and Director of Maintenance and Operations here at the Richland School District. And John Bosworth here in the back, to your folks' right, my left, is our business official. Okay. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Brian Jones. He'll take you on a tour if you would like to join. Take you on a tour of Richland Center High School. You can see some of the facilities and things that are being examined here. And if you haven't been in our buildings in a while, this is a good time to be able to do that. And then if you do have any questions that come along on the tour, Brian can try to answer, or reach out to me, swing by the district office on your way out, and I'll try to answer any questions if something comes up on the tour. But otherwise, I thank you for coming. I think it's important for people to be informed. It's so difficult for us to get the word out, get the information out. So I appreciate folks that come and try to get the accurate information and not rely on what they might hear on social media or from someone else that may not be accurate information. I actually had somebody ask me last week, I heard you guys were going to Referendum last week. And this has been going on for a year and a half now, and somebody just heard about it. And this is somebody who I consider normally relatively informed. So I appreciate you coming out here and getting accurate information, and please let me know if you have any questions, okay?